She has no claim here. She never did. My brother said that in front of 12 people, our family's estate attorney, 2 accountants, my mother's oldest friends, and a paralegal who kept her eyes down the entire time. He said it the way men say things when they've already decided they've won. Flat. Final. Like he was reading from a script he'd memorized years ago. I didn't move. I didn't look at him. I looked at the mahogany table and thought about the first time I sat at it. I was 9. My mother had brought me here, to this same firm, to sign paperwork for a savings bond she'd put in my name. She'd held my hand on the way out and said, "Someday, you'll understand what it means to plan ahead." I understood now. She just hadn't told me everything she'd planned. My brother's name is Adrian. He's 43, 11 years older than me, and he has spent the better part of my life treating me like a footnote to his story. When we were kids, he got the car, the trips, the introductions to our father's business contacts. I got good grades and a pat on the head. When I graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown Law, he sent a card with a $20 gift card to Starbucks inside. No note. I told myself it didn't matter. I had work. I had a plan. What I didn't have, for a long time, was proof that my mother saw me differently than everyone else did. That proof was sitting in a sealed envelope on the conference table, and no one in that room except me and the attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Forsyth, who had been my mother's counsel for 22 years, knew what was inside it. Let me go back. My mother, Patricia Ann Whitmore, died on a Tuesday in October peacefully in the home she'd lived in for 38 years. She had been sick for 2 years. I knew it was coming. Knowing doesn't make it easier. Anyone who tells you it does has never sat beside someone they love and watched them get smaller. I drove up to see her every weekend for the last 8 months. 6 hours round trip. I brought her soup she could barely eat and books she couldn't finish. And we watched old movies, and I held her hand, and we talked about everything except the fact that she was dying. Adrian visited twice. Both times he brought his wife, Claudette, who spent most of each visit asking my mother questions about the house. Who gets the piano, Mom? What about the silver set? You know Adrian always loved that silver set. My mother would smile and say, "Everything is taken care of, sweetheart." She wasn't talking to Claudette. The estate, on paper, looked like this. The family home in Chevy Chase, appraised at $1.4 million, a portfolio of investments my father had built before he died, now worth approximately $2.2 million, a lake house in western Maryland that had been in the family for 40 years, and a small commercial property on Connecticut Avenue that my mother had purchased quietly on her own 12 years ago, something she'd never mentioned at family dinners. She'd paid cash. She'd put it in an LLC. Adrian had known about the home, the portfolio, and the lake house. He'd been calculating his share for years. I'd heard him on the phone once, talking to Claudette in a low voice that he thought didn't carry. The portfolio alone is worth more than 2 of my current projects combined. He was a real estate developer. He was also, as I discovered during the past 2 years while helping my mother organize her documents, considerably more leveraged than anyone in the family knew. 3 failed condo developments, a balloon payment coming due in February, and a line of credit he'd secured using his personal assets. Assets that were, I'd realized when I looked at the paperwork, not nearly enough to cover what he owed. He needed this inheritance. Not wanted. Needed. So when Mr. Forsyth called us in for the reading, me, Adrian, Claudette, and my mother's sister, Aunt Bev, who was only there as a witness, my brother walked in with the energy of a man collecting a check he'd already spent. He sat at the head of the table. Not his place. Mr. Forsyth didn't correct him. Aunt Bev squeezed my hand under the table when I sat down next to her. She was 71 and had her sister's eyes, and when she looked at me, I had to focus very hard on the middle distance to keep my face steady. Mr. Forsyth began reading. The house went to Adrian. The lake house split equally between us. The investment portfolio. And here's where my brother's attorney, a man named Clifford who smelled like expensive cologne and condescension, leaned forward slightly. The investment portfolio, to be divided with 70% to Adrian and 30% to me. Pending resolution of any outstanding claims, Adrian exhaled through his nose. a victory exhale. Small and controlled, but I heard it. Then Mr. Forsyth paused. He removed his glasses, cleaned them with the cloth he kept folded in his breast pocket, put them back on. There is a secondary instrument, he said, executed 14 months ago. It pertains specifically to the Connecticut Avenue property and certain other assets not yet disclosed to the general estate. Clifford straightened. What other assets? Mrs. Whitmore maintained a separate trust, Mr. White, Forsyth said, established independently of the family estate. The trust holds the commercial property, a separate securities account, and a directing interest in a holdings company registered in Delaware. He slid a document across the table. The sole beneficiary of that trust is her daughter. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when the air changes. Claudette made a sound. Not words, just a sound. Adrian turned to look at me, and I saw it happen in real time. The calculation, the confusion, the recalibration. His face ran through 4 expressions in about 2 seconds before it settled on the one I knew best. Contempt. That's not possible, he said. Mom would have told me. Your mother chose to keep this instrument private, Mr. Forsyth said. That was entirely within her legal right. How much? Clifford asked. Mr. Forsyth named a figure. I won't write it here, because this isn't about the number. But I will say that Clifford's pen stopped moving. Adrian pushed back from the table. This is a mistake. Or it's something she did. He gestured at me without looking at me. She had something to do with this. She was up there every weekend. You think that was just out of love? She was working on her. Adrian. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Don't. He stood up. You always did this. You always made her feel guilty for choosing me. You always made her think I didn't care about her. You visited twice, I said, in 2 years. I had projects. You had a balloon payment, I said, due in February, on the Riverside development. I know what your exposure looks like, Adrian. I helped Mom go through her files. She knew too. That landed. I watched it land. She left you the house, I said. She left you the majority of the portfolio. What she put in trust for me is what she built herself, separately, quietly, over 12 years. That was hers to give however she chose. I looked at him and I felt something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. She chose. Clifford leaned over and said something low in Adrian's ear. Adrian shook his head. We'll contest it, he said. Undue influence. She was ill. She wasn't thinking clearly. She executed the trust 14 months ago, Mr. Forsyth said calmly. At that time, 2 independent physicians provided letters attesting to her full cognitive capacity. She anticipated this concern. He folded his hands. She was quite thorough. Of course she was, I said, and for the first time since I'd sat down, my voice cracked a little, not from the money, not from winning, from hearing, in that language, legal language, document language, my mother's voice, planning ahead, taking care of things, making sure. Adrian looked at me. He looked at me for a long time. She always liked you better. I thought about the Starbucks card. I thought about the last night she was really herself, when she looked at me in the thin hospital light and said, I need you to understand that I know what you've done, all of it, and I want you to have something that no one can argue about. Yes, I said to my brother. She did. He left. Claudette followed. Clifford gathered his papers with the careful movements of a man who was already thinking about his invoice. Aunt Bev put her hand over mine. She told me, she said. A year ago, she said. Bev, I've taken care of it. The right one will be fine. I nodded. I couldn't speak. You're the one who showed up, Aunt Bev said. That's all it was. You just kept showing up. 2 weeks later, Adrian's attorney sent a formal letter to Mr. Forsyth contesting the trust. The grounds were undue influence and alleged cognitive impairment at the time of signing. I wasn't surprised. I had, in fact, been waiting for it. Here is what Adrian's attorney didn't know. I am not just a daughter. I am an attorney. I have been practicing trust and estate litigation for 6 years at a firm in Washington, D.C. I don't advertise this to my family. My brother, in particular, has no idea what I do all day. He knows I work in law, the way you know someone works in finance, vague, unexamined, filed away under things that are less impressive than what I do. What I do, specifically, is this: I help people protect assets from exactly the kind of challenge Adrian was now filing. I had not helped my mother structure her trust. I had kept myself deliberately at arm's length from that process. She'd used Mr. Forsyth and an independent estate planning attorney named Ms. Okafor, who specialized in high net worth family trusts. I had done this specifically so that no one could claim I had engineered the outcome. The conflict wall was clean. My fingerprints were not on the documents, but I knew what those documents contained, and I knew that they would hold. The cognitive impairment argument collapsed in about 3 weeks. My mother's physicians, both of whom she had, characteristically, briefed in advance, provided affidavits that were borderline airtight. One of them noted in his statement that at the time of signing, my mother had been reading The Power Broker and had offered a 20-minute analysis of Robert Moses' use of bridge height as a tool of racial segregation. Cognitively impaired, he wrote, she was not. The undue influence argument took a little longer. Adrian's attorney tried to argue that my weekly visits constituted a pattern of access designed to isolate my mother from other family members. This argument required, as its foundation, the claim that Adrian had been somehow prevented from visiting. He had not been prevented. He had simply not come. His own phone records, subpoenaed as part of the discovery process, showed 7 calls to my mother over the final 18 months of her life. I had visited 31 times. I had stayed overnight on 9 occasions. This was documented in the visitor log that the home health aide my mother employed had kept as a matter of professional practice. 7 calls. When the judge reviewed the preliminary filings, she asked Adrian's attorney a single question. What specific actions did the respondent take to prevent your client from maintaining contact with the decedent? Clifford did not have an answer, because there was no answer, because nothing had prevented Adrian from getting in his car and driving north. He had simply decided that other things were more important, and then, when it turned out that decision had consequences, he had decided it must be someone else's fault. The case was dismissed at the preliminary stage. Frivolous, the judge noted. She awarded attorney's fees. I found out on a Thursday afternoon, sitting at my desk with a cold cup of coffee and a deposition I was supposed to be reviewing. Mr. Forsyth called me himself. It's done, he said. She won. She's gone. I said. Yes, he said quietly, but she knew what she was doing. I sat there for a while after I hung up. The Connecticut Avenue property. I'd been by it a few times in the past year, just to look. It was a small building, 4 stories, brick face, occupied by a dental practice and a tutoring center and a Thai restaurant that had apparently been there for 15 years and smelled incredible every time I walked past. It wasn't glamorous. It was, in the way my mother had been, practical and solid and more valuable than it looked. I thought about what I was going to do with it. I hadn't decided yet. I thought I might keep it for a while. Let the tenants run their businesses. Come by sometimes and smell the restaurant. My mother had understood something about money that I've tried to hold on to. It's not about what you have. It's about what you build quietly, over time, when no one is watching. It's about being the kind of person who plans ahead. 3 months after the dismissal, I was in the grocery store. A Saturday, ordinary. I was buying coffee and eggs when my phone buzzed with a notification from a real estate news aggregator I followed. The Riverside development, Adrian's project. It had entered foreclosure. The lender had called the note. I put my phone away. I bought my eggs. I drove home thinking about my mother, not about my brother. I thought about how she never raised her voice, how she kept her files in perfect order, labeled in her careful handwriting, rubber-banded in groups, how she had known probably for years exactly who would show up and who wouldn't, and how she had planned accordingly, quietly, the way she did everything. She left him the house. 41 years of family dinners and holidays and the sound of my father's voice in those walls. She did not cut him out. She was not cruel. She simply gave each of us what she believed we had earned. I think about what she said to me that last night. I want you to have something no one can argue about. They argued anyway. That was always going to happen, but she had made it so they couldn't win. I put fresh flowers in my apartment that weekend. Not for any reason, just because she liked them, and I am trying, lately, to do things because she would have liked them. The tutoring center in her building called last week. They're expanding. They want to take on the floor above them. I told them I'd think about it. I think I'll say yes. She would have said yes,